Network policies are an application-centric construct which allow you to specify how a pod is allowed to communicate with various network entities over the network. In this video, we will cover ingress traffic, egress traffic, policies, what is default policy, what is allowed, what is denied, and finally network policy, its kind in Kubernetes and policy types. In the end, we will also share details about a free Kubernetes masterclass. Network policy is a part of network security and is important, especially when you are preparing for Kubernetes certification. That is Certified Kubernetes Administrator (CKA) or Certified Kubernetes Security Specialist. That's CKS. For both these exams, you should have an understanding of network policy. Welcome to another episode of Docker and Kubernetes video series from K21 Academy, where we take you from complete beginner covering microservices and Docker to all the way installing and configuring Kubernetes cluster, including networking, storage, deployment, pods, and scaling your Kubernetes cluster using horizontal pod autoscaling, including how to prepare for the certification exam, CKA or CKS. We have taken a clip from one of our certification training program on Docker and Kubernetes for administrators. That's CKA, and in this clip, our instructor will talk about network policies. So, this is a clip taken from a module on security, network policy, config map, and resource quota. Let's hear from our instructor on the same.
Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we would be discussing about the network security aspect. So last video, we saw how we can restrict a user from executing a specific API call or authenticate that user and then authorize that user for specific set of actions. But when we are talking about application talking to each other, all the pods present in the cluster can talk to each other. They are not isolated. They accept traffic from any source within the cluster. But normally how it happens, if I have a front-end application and I have a back-end application, I whitelist the IP address of my front-end in my back-end, and I make sure that when the request is coming to my back-end database, it is only coming from that particular front-end server. So we will have to implement network policies to restrict the traffic which is being allowed as an incoming traffic to a pod, or to restrict a traffic which has to go out from a specific pod. So we can create some set of rules and we can specify what sort of traffic would be allowed to a specific set of pods or a single pod, or what sort of traffic can originate from a pod. So there can be two types of traffic, right? Ingress is the incoming traffic and egress is the outgoing traffic. So you can create policies, you can define rules which will restrict the outgoing traffic and which will have conditions and restrict the incoming traffic to a pod. So when you create a policy, you can specify a group of pod or a normal one single pod which can communicate with the other one. And you can specify that, or else instead of using the pod labels and all, we can even specify a range of IP addresses from which I can expect a packet to come up. In this way, what I'm doing, I'm isolating a pod and I'm saying that when the incoming traffic is coming, it is coming from only from specified IP address or from the specific subnet or from a specific pod itself, right? So you are attaching a policy and restricting the incoming traffic or restricting the outgoing traffic. As soon as you attach a policy to a pod, only whatever is allowed would be allowed, rest everything gets denied. So what am I saying? That by default, all is allowed. If I have pods in my cluster, default policy is to allow all. This is default policy. But as soon as you create a network policy, kind network policy, and attach to a particular pod, you say this policy would be working for this particular pod. So whatever you allow here, that only is allowed. Rest is all denied. So unless and until you have a policy, everything is allowed. As soon as you implement a policy for a pod, then only whatever you specify is allowed, rest all is denied. So we have to be very sure what we allow, and because if we don't allow something, it will be falling into the default denied case. So let's look how do we define our network policies. So this is a kind network policy. It has an API version on which the network policy kind was introduced, a metadata associated with this network policy. That is the name of the policy. I am saying I would allow hello allow from foo. So I'll be allowing a traffic from a specific label to a specific label of the pod. And in the specification section, I can specify the policy type. Either a policy can be ingress type or a policy can be egress type. So this is a ingress policy. In the ingress policy, I can specify my condition. In this condition, I'm saying I'm selecting the pod which has label as app hello. So this policy is applicable to the pods which are labeled as app hello. And what is the policy? Ingress policy here specifies that I would allow traffic from pods which are labeled as app foo. So pods which are labeled as app foo can only send traffic to pods which are labeled as app hello. App hello will not accept traffic from any other pod apart from pods which are labeled as app foo. So here if you say that this is the type of the policy and this is the rule inside the ingress policy, from section denotes that it is coming from, and here in the ingress I'm saying this policy type or this ingress policy is applicable to this particular labeled pod. So this policy is applied on app hello, but it would accept traffic from pods which are labeled as app foo. So this is for the incoming traffic. If we have a similar way to define the outgoing traffic, the packet which is originating, then I can say whom I can send packet to. So here if you see, for foo to send packet to app hello, by default it can send packet to anyone unless and until a network policy is created. But if I have created a network policy, because hello is expecting packet from foo, I should allow the outgoing packet from the foo type of applications, right? So here it is again kind network policy. You have the API version, the metadata has the name of the policy, and in the spec section, instead of ingress policy type, this time you have the egress policy. And here the egress policy which you see, it says I'm selecting app foo type of labeled pod. And app foo can send packet to here. It can send packet to pods which are labeled as app hello. So app hello is expecting packet from foo and foo is saying I can send only to hello. So both the sides are fixed. Ingress is also fixed in the hello type of application and egress type is fixed in the foo type of application. So this is how you can specify your conditions in the network policy section. Either it can be an incoming condition or it can be an outgoing condition. Depending on that, you specify the policy type. For incoming traffic, it is ingress policy, and for outgoing traffic, it is an egress policy. You can also say a section of the entire IP address which you would like to allow, or a subnet you want to allow. All those things also can be specified, but this is very much too much oriented towards developer. That's the reason we are just covering a brief overview of the network security section in the admin course. That's all about the network security. We would see the rest, creation of ingress and egress policy, in the hands-on exercise video. Thank you.
So that was a clip taken from one of the lessons from our step-by-step training program on Docker and Kubernetes for beginners, including certifications, CKA and CKS. I would like to invite you for a free masterclass on how to kickstart your journey in Docker and Kubernetes, right from learning basics, what is Docker, what is Kubernetes, and getting certified by using our step-by-step 12 weeks roadmap to go from complete beginner to certified Kubernetes administrator. If you're interested, register for a free class by going on to k21academy.com/Kubernetes02. Now, the next batch for the training is starting on 19th of January, so it's few days after the video gets published. And if you're watching this in future, I still highly recommend you going through this free class to see what to expect in the exam and learn basics on Docker and Kubernetes. So, k21academy.com/Kubernetes02. I will see you in another episode of Docker and Kubernetes from K21 Academy. Till then, take care.